Hello, and welcome to Nighttime Fables, a haven where stories come to life under the gentle hush of evening, guiding you toward a peaceful night's rest. Tonight, we bring you another calming tale, one crafted to ease your mind and invite a sense of tranquil calm. But first, let's take a few moments to prepare both body and mind for a restful sleep. Make yourself comfortable, and with each slow inhale and gentle exhale, feel the day's worries slowly melt away. It can be challenging to separate from the bustle of the day, especially as bedtime nears. Yet remember, the less we fret about falling asleep, the more our minds can let go of lingering tension. Let the gentle flow of your breathing soothe any concerns and allow tonight's story to guide you into a deep, restorative slumber. Now get cozy and let the soft glow of nighttime fables envelope you. Enjoy this story, and may it lead you into a serene and restful sleep. Where the broad, languid river curved like polished silver through the land, there stood, in an age now softened by time's passage, a city of enchanting grace. It was the jewel of the kingdom, its preeminence assured, for within its walls, nestled in a palace of breathtaking beauty, resided the royal lineage. The river itself, a lifeblood, carved a natural nexus for commerce. Its bustling port became a conduit, dispatching and welcoming cargoes that journeyed downstream to the coastal towns and ventured even into the vastness beyond the sea. This reputation for thriving trade, coupled with its strategic position upon the waterway, infused the city with a vibrant pulse and considerable prosperity. Merchants, their enterprises flourishing, erected dignified residences along both banks. Elegant bridges arched over the water, seeming almost to float, ethereal links uniting the communities on the left shore with those on the right. Even artisans of humbler means found fortune in the city's robust energy. Farriers found ample steeds to shoe. Smiths forged tools in abundance, and apothecaries mixed potions for a populace well served. The adage held true: a rising tide lifts all boats, and the citizens here knew its blessing well. The reigning monarch, King Theron, possessed a genial and celebratory spirit, perhaps bordering, some whispered, on the frivolous. His daughter, the Princess Lyra, commanded widespread admiration. Hopeful aspirants to her hand arrived from neighboring realms, bearing treasures of ostentatious worth. The throne room accumulated drifts of jewels, fragrant soaps crafted with exquisite care, ingenious mechanical bird-song boxes, and chests brimming with exotic teas and spices. Each suitor strove to eclipse his predecessor with offerings meant to convey devotion. Yet, their contest was complicated by more than mere rivalry. It transpired that Princess Lyra, beyond her radiant beauty and resolute will, was endowed with a formidable intellect. Consequently, matrimony was a state she approached with deliberation, not haste. As the sole inheritor of the throne, her life had been dedicated to pursuits of her choosing, poring over classical manuscripts, mastering languages, delving into history's currents, and immersing herself in music's harmonies. The princess maintained exacting standards for any prospective consort, and suitor after suitor found themselves unequal to the challenge of her conversation. One by one, they faced courteous dismissal. King Theron, for his part, felt no urgency for her betrothal. Indeed, he was frequently preoccupied with the sheer enjoyment of existence and the diversions of courtly life to raise objections. King Theron owned a magnificent steed of purest white, and among his cherished diversions were extended rides through the surrounding woodlands. Upon one such afternoon, while indulging in a spirited canter among the trees, his mount was startled by a cunning fox darting across their path. The loyal creature reared violently, unseating the king. Though largely unharmed, his foot became ensnared in the stirrup during the fall. Days of convalescence followed, with court healers applying myriad poultices, yet the king's foot never truly regained its former comfort. Walking, alas, became an awkward, painful affair. A shadow fell over his spirit at the thought that life's simple pleasures might be forever diminished. Sometime thereafter, a new suitor presented himself to the princess, bearing a gift of true marvel: a pair of slippers fashioned from the most delicate pink silk, soft as a newborn's size. These slippers, the suitor avowed, possessed the enchantment to allow ceaseless dancing, day and night, without the slightest ache of fatigue. Lyra regarded this assertion with skepticism, yet, embracing a spirit of empirical inquiry, she donned the slippers for a glittering ball hosted by a city merchant the following evening. To her astonishment, the promise held fast. She danced with unflagging energy throughout the opulent affair, continuing well into the next day until sheer exhaustion, not sore feet, compelled her to cease. Miraculously, her feet felt as fresh during the final measure as they had at the first. Intrigued by their provenance, she inquired of the suitor how he had acquired such footwear. He confessed to paying a substantial sum to a renowned itinerant cordwainer who had journeyed through his own kingdom. An idea sparked within Lyra. Could similar artistry benefit her father? If such therapeutic wizardry could be applied to the king's affliction, perhaps, she dared hope, he might walk with ease once more. She dispatched one of the king's swiftest and most trusted retainers with instructions to locate this elusive craftsman, promising extravagant recompense should he deliver a miraculous remedy. Weeks stretched into a monotonous expanse, and Lyra's father remained largely confined to his chambers. The king's malaise cast a pall over the city. When Theron languished, so did his capital. Festivities ceased abruptly, deprived of the monarch's customary penchant for planning celebrations. The townsfolk discovered life had lost much of its customary sparkle. At long last, one afternoon, the retainer returned, the famed artisan cordwainer in tow. A ripple of anticipation spread through the court. Rumor whispered that the guest carried with him a shoe purported to banish the king's discomfort entirely. Its presentation scheduled for the throne room the very next day. Naturally, the cordwainer was afforded the palace's most luxurious guest suite. He installed himself with considerable ceremony, directing footmen to place a distinctive, ornately carved wooden chest at the foot of his bed. All attention converged on this chest, for within it, everyone surmised lay the king's magical deliverance. Among the palace servants moved a young man named Elian, tasked with tending the fireplaces and maintaining order within the rooms. Elian possessed a quiet intelligence and a comely aspect. Raised by his uncle, Master Silas, proprietor of a local bookshop, he had spent years immersed in reading, though his pockets remained perpetually empty. Securing employment at the palace represented his most viable path to solvency. And so, day after day, his hours were consumed by the soot and ash, a task he performed with quiet diligence and unvoiced acceptance. Elian entered the artisan cordwainer's chamber after the man had descended for his evening meal. He built up the fire, his gaze sweeping the room for any disarray needing attention. It settled upon the intricately worked wooden box. Like all others, he felt its potent significance and found himself unable to resist a fleeting glimpse. His fingers traced the elaborate carvings before he succumbed to curiosity. Lifting the heavy metal latch, he peered inside. There, nestled upon deep purple velvet, lay a single, large slipper of pristine white silk. He dared not touch it, lest ashes mar its perfection. Never had he beheld footwear so exquisite. As he admired it, a sound echoed from the corridor. The cordwainer returning. Hastily, Elian secured the lid and slid beneath the bed, concealing himself behind the deep dust ruffle. The cordwainer entered, and Elian heard the clink of items being placed upon a nearby table. Pressing his cheek to the cool floorboards, he could just discern the man setting out a small jar and a soft brush. The man then approached the wooden chest, perilously close to Elian's hiding place, but seemed utterly unaware of his presence. Instead, he retrieved the beautiful white slipper. Carrying it back to the table, he proceeded to delicately brush the slipper's interior with a substance from the jar, a powder that scintillated briefly in the firelight. He tapped the brush thrice against the jar's rim, resealed it, and carefully stored away his materials along with the shoe. His task complete, humming a cheerful tune, the cordwainer donned a velvet cloak and departed the chamber once more. Certain the coast was clear, Elian emerged from his refuge. The table stood empty now, the chest securely fastened. Unwilling to risk discovery, he quit the room and resumed his duties. Yet, as he swept and tidied, the image of the slipper and the enigmatic powder refused to leave his thoughts. What purpose, he pondered, did that glittering dust serve? Elian was not present in the throne room the following day for the grand unveiling, but tidings of the shoe's triumph spread swiftly through the servants' grapevine. According to the excited whispers, the king's pain had evaporated the instant the slipper touched his foot. His former ebullience had returned. Indeed, Theron was reportedly already strolling the gardens with members of his court, and plans for a magnificent ball were underway. The artisan cordwainer, lavished with gold, had departed to pursue commissions in distant lands. A collective sigh of relief swept the city. Life, it seemed, would resume its joyful rhythm. King Theron plunged back into existence with renewed gusto, soon dedicating his energies to organizing a spectacular regatta upon the river, an event for all citizens to enjoy. The day was declared a public holiday, promising games, races, and naturally abundant feasting. A grand barge was commissioned upon which the king and his court would assemble mid river to observe the boat races, a vessel spacious enough even for dancing. Speculation buzzed regarding who would be granted the privilege of joining the royal party afloat. The holiday dawned beneath sparkling sunshine. The river teemed with small boats adorned with colorful pennants, its clear waters shimmering as if strewn with liquid jewels. Music drifted through the air, mingling with the enticing aromas of festive fare. Aboard the barge, the king and his retinue reveled, dancing, dining, and laughing as the day unfolded. Then the unforeseen occurred. Leaning over the railing to address someone in a passing vessel, the king lost his footing, teetering precariously close to the water's edge. Swift hands steadied him, averting disaster, but in the commotion, his cherished white slipper slipped from his foot. It struck the water, bobbed momentarily on the surface, and then vanished beneath the glittering current. A cry arose. All able swimmers were urged to dive in pursuit. Occupants of nearby boats leaned low, trailing hands through the water. Many plunged directly into the river, searching frantically. Yet, despite every effort, the slipper remained lost. Almost immediately, the king began to complain of returning discomfort, insisting he could no longer bear weight on his foot. He was carried back to the palace, utterly disconsolate. In the ensuing days, the river became a hive of activity. The king offered a substantial reward to anyone retrieving the lost slipper. News spread rapidly to adjacent kingdoms, attracting fortune seekers eager to claim the prize. They scoured the riverbanks, dredged the muddy bottom, and cast nets from boats, meticulously combing the same channels day after weary day. Lyra observed their fruitless endeavors, watched her father sink deeper into despondency with each passing failure. One morning, her resolve hardened. She made a proclamation. In addition to her father's reward, she would bestow her hand in marriage upon whoever succeeded in this formidable quest. Secretly, however, Lyra harbored little hope of the slipper's recovery. The river was deep and had claimed far greater treasures than footwear. Her true hope lay elsewhere, that perhaps someone possessing ingenuity, a mind she could respect, a spirit she might come to love, would devise a more creative, more enduring solution to her father's plight. Like every soul in the kingdom, Elian heard Princess Lyra's declaration. Though merely a servant, he was utterly captivated by the princess, finding her brilliance as dazzling as her beauty. He recalled his uncle Silas's bookshop, specifically a shelf dedicated to volumes on science and alchemy. In his youth, he had devoured those pages, marveling at the arcane knowledge they contained. While ignorant of enchanted footwear, the memory of the cordwainer secretly applying powder to the king's slipper remained vivid. Logic dictated that the powder, not the shoe itself, must be the source of the pain relief. Elian resolved to seek the origin of this powdered remedy rather than squander time searching for the lost slipper. His pursuit became tireless. While the riverbanks thronged with hopeful divers and diligent searchers, Elian dedicated his scant free hours to his uncle's bookshop. It was a sanctuary, piled high with tomes of every description. Culinary guides and weather histories jostled for space. Classical texts in diverse tongues lay beside stacks of novels and storybooks, interspersed with volumes of poetry. Here and there, nestled in quiet corners, worn armchairs invited visitors to lose themselves for hours within the embrace of a good book. Elian haunted these nooks and crannies, absorbing knowledge. When time forbade lingering, he borrowed books on alchemy and herbalism, carrying them back to the palace to study during stolen moments. One day, buried within a dusty treatise on plant lore, he found his answer. It spoke of a particular flower native to a specific locale on the plains of a neighboring kingdom. Its pollen, renowned for its analgesic properties, required harvesting by moonlight and resisted dilution. It must be used in its pure, powdery state. Consulting the maps available to him, Elian calculated the journey would demand approximately a week's travel on horseback. A significant obstacle arose. He possessed no horse, nor did his uncle. Any acquaintance fortunate enough to own such an animal could scarcely spare it for weeks on end. Elian understood that reaching this miraculous plant represented his sole chance to resolve the king's predicament and, perhaps, just perhaps, win Lyra's hand. Gambling everything, he determined to approach the king directly during the next public audience. Later that week, he joined the queue of citizens awaiting their turn outside the king's chambers. These audiences were invariably protracted and taxing affairs, the king's patience often fraying as the day wore on. Unfortunately for Elian, he found himself near the end of the line. After many hours, with only a few petitioners remaining, Elian finally stood before the monarch. King Theron gestured impatiently, indicating Elian should state his business quickly. "Your Highness," Elian began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I believe I may have discovered a means to cure your ailment, but I shall require the loan of a horse." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled courtiers. The sheer audacity, a servant boy requesting a royal steed, proposing he could succeed where all others had failed, was preposterous. Aware his time was fleeting, Elian pressed on. "There is a flower," he explained, "that grows in a unique location. I know its whereabouts, but reaching it on foot would consume a month. If your Highness could but lend me a horse, I could return within 2 weeks and alleviate your suffering." Murmurs of disbelief and amusement spread among the nobles. The king shifted upon his throne, and Elian braced himself for dismissal. But the young man was met with astonishment. To the amazement of everyone present, the king declared, "Grant this boy a horse and dispatch him. If he can achieve what all of you could not, the risk is negligible." Then, With a flourish of his hand, he dismissed Elian and instructed the remaining audience members to depart as well. Princess Lyra, seated nearby throughout this extraordinary exchange, felt a surge of intrigue. This young man's discernment in pursuing a novel approach commanded her immediate respect. She admired cleverness and his courage in presenting such a bold petition before the king was undeniable. Though wary of false hope, the princess found herself secretly wishing Elian might indeed conjure a miracle. Meanwhile, Elian hastened to prepare for his journey. News of his audience had spread like wildfire. Whispers about the audacious servant boy filled the castle corridors. His fellow servants rallied around him as he made ready. The palace cook packed generous provisions, while the grooms offered him one of the finest horses from the royal stables. Every eye was now upon Elian. He embarked the following day, equipped with food, water, the precious herbalist tome, and a map provided by his uncle. Master Silas held immense faith in his nephew, trusting that Elian's learning and bravery would guide him to the cure. Soon, Elian found himself venturing farther beyond the city limits than ever before. He traversed the serene river, journeyed through dense forests, and navigated a windswept mountain pass, emerging onto the vast, grassy plains beyond. He rode relentlessly, pausing only for essential rest. When at last rolling expanses of wildflowers stretched before him under the immense sky, he knew he had arrived. Retrieving the invaluable herbalist book from his saddlebag, he allowed his horse to graze while he began methodically circling the area, comparing the flora to the illustration clutched in his hand. The search consumed the better part of the day. As the sun dipped towards the horizon, painting the clouds in fiery hues, he discovered a large cluster of white blossoms perfectly matching the book's description. His treasure was found. Taking sustenance from his pack, he settled in the tall grass, contentedly eating his supper as twilight deepened. According to the text, darkness would coax the flowers open, revealing their precious gift. He drifted into slumber beneath a sky ablaze with the embers of sunset. The hoot of a night owl roused him some time later. He sat up in the cool darkness, rubbing sleep from his eyes. There, bathed in the ethereal glow of the moon, lay a sea of open blooms. Taking his jar, just as the book instructed, he gently tapped each receptive flower, carefully shaking its glittering pollen into the container. He performed this task with patient precision, moving from cluster to cluster until the jar was completely full. He secured the cap tightly and stored the jar safely in his saddlebag. As dawn painted the eastern sky, Elian was already urging his horse homeward. Yet, a persistent question shadowed his thoughts. What if the powder failed? Everything hinged upon his faith in this botanical remedy. Back through the wind-swept mountain pass he rode, retracing his path through the deep woods. Within roughly a week, he approached the familiar silhouette of the city he called home. he crossed one of the soaring bridges, his heart a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. His return to the stable yard sparked considerable excitement among the palace staff. Servants gathered around, eager for news of his quest. Had he succeeded? What trials had he faced? Would the cure truly work? Elian responded courteously but deferred their questions, stating he could not yet provide answers. Instead, he carefully withdrew the precious jar from his baggage, tucking it securely into his coat pocket. As the servants dispersed, he bowed respectfully to one of the lady's maids, venturing a request. "Might I possibly borrow a soft brush? The sort a lady might use for applying face powder." The maid readily agreed and fetched the requested item while Elian waited. Brush in hand, he returned to his uncle's bookshop, carrying the herbalist book, the map, and his jar of potent pollen. Tomorrow, he would face the king once more. By the following day, word of Elian's return had permeated the entire city. The unassuming young man, previously unnoticed, had become an object of intense curiosity. At the king's command, Elian was granted the first position in the day's audience. As the majestic, carved double doors of the throne room swung inward, he inhaled deeply, straightened his shoulders, and fought to quell the rising tide of doubt. He walked towards the dais where King Theron sat, Princess Lyra beside him. The room felt unusually crowded. The entire court, it seemed, had convened to witness this spectacle. Bowing low, Elian began. "Your Majesty, I have returned with what I believe will end your pain, but it requires no special shoe," he stated clearly. The king regarded him with palpable skepticism. Undeterred, Elian drew the jar and the small brush from his coat. "If you would permit me access to the shoe you currently wear, I shall demonstrate," he continued. The request was highly irregular. A commoner did not typically handle the king's footwear. Nevertheless, after a moment's hesitation, the king nodded his assent. A servant knelt and removed the silk slipper from the royal foot. Elian inclined his head respectfully, took the king's shoe, and carefully uncapped the jar. Using the borrowed brush, he lightly dusted the interior, mimicking the precise motions he had observed the cordwainer perform that night beneath the bed. The application complete, the decisive moment arrived. Elian returned the shoe to the waiting servant, who gently eased it back onto the king's foot. Elian risked a glance at Lyra. Her eyes were wide, her breath held captive. The king stood. He flexed his ankle. He took a tentative step, then another, more confident. He executed a light hop. A radiant smile broke across his face, transforming his features. He began to dance, waving his hands joyfully above his head. The throne room erupted in a cacophony of astonished chatter from 100 nobles witnessing the most extraordinary event in recent memory. But for Elian, only Lyra's reaction mattered. Shyly, he met her gaze directly. To his profound relief, She returned his look with a smile that mirrored the king's newfound joy. Though all attention remained fixed on the jubilant monarch, these two souls understood that in that instant their own story had truly begun. And so it transpired that King Theron regained his former self. Realizing the slipper held no intrinsic magic, merely the vessel for the cure, he commissioned an extravagant wardrobe of slippers in myriad colors, each readily treatable with the wondrous pollen. Numerous festivities and galas were planned that year, yet none surpassed the splendor of the wedding uniting Lyra and Elian. The pair became inseparable. Even before their nuptials, they were often sighted strolling through the palace gardens, lost in animated conversation. Together they spearheaded the creation of an extensive royal library, stocked naturally by Elian's delighted Uncle Silas. This haven boasted plush, comfortable chairs, towering rolling ladders for reaching the highest shelves, and broad tables displaying large atlases. Lyra and Elian, after all, felt they both still had a great deal of reading ahead of them. King Theron rarely frequented the library, but his happiness was restored, and with it, the contentment of the citizens dwelling in the glittering city by the river. Knowing Lyra and Elian were destined to inherit the crown, the populace felt assured their lives would continue to be blessed by merriment, prosperity, and now a welcome measure of good sense. To behold a rose unfurling its petals is to be drawn into the vibrant pulse of the now, a fleeting immersion in scent and sight. Yet, this very blossom whispers of impermanence. Its ephemeral reign, a mere fortnight perhaps, deepens our reverence for its transient splendor. The rose, it seems, belongs wholly to the present moment, its history rarely contemplated amid its immediate allure. Yet delve deeper, and the rose reveals an astonishing antiquity. While not the planet's primordial bloom, its lineage stretches back an immense span, some 35 million years at the very least, a fossilized testament unearthed in the earth of Colorado bears silent witness to this age. Consider this. When that ancient rose first opened to the sun, the great reptiles had already slumbered in extinction for 30 million years. Our own species, Homo sapiens, emerged a mere 300,000 years past. That primordial rose, then, stands closer in time to the dinosaurs than to us. For millennia uncounted, wild roses painted landscapes across the globe. The earliest confirmed whispers of deliberate cultivation arise from ancient China around 500 BCE. Contemporaneously, perhaps, similar efforts stirred in the sun-drenched lands of the Mediterranean and Persia. Beyond tending the wild varieties, gardeners began their patient alchemy, coaxing forth a new lineage, the flower that would become known as the Cathay bloom. This progenitor of countless modern cultivars possessed the remarkable trait of blooming persistently through the seasons. Chinese emperors succumbed to a profound fascination with these flowers. The sage Master Kalen, living in the 6th century BCE, noted the existence of 600 volumes dedicated solely to rose cultivation within the imperial library. This royal preoccupation endured for ages. Centuries later, during the Han dynasty, cultivation exploded onto a grand scale, vast tracts of land dedicated to the rose, sometimes even encroaching upon vital farmland as emperors filled palace grounds and the surrounding countryside with rippling fields of blossoms. Elsewhere, the rose wove itself into the cultural fabric in different patterns. In the cradles of ancient Greece and Rome, widespread cultivation mirroring China's fervor seems absent. Nevertheless, the rose resonated with symbolic weight, held in high esteem. It was perhaps in Greece that the flower first became entwined with love's fierce heat. Lyra, the Greek embodiment of love, and her Roman counterpart, Aurelia, were both intimately linked to the rose. In Lorenzo Verrocchio's masterful depiction, the genesis of Aurelia, the goddess emerges from the ocean foam upon a shell, while winds scatter cascades of pink roses around her. Myths abound, tying Lyra to the bloom. One tells of white roses springing from the sea foam at her birth. Another recounts how a thorn pierced her foot, her divine blood staining the pristine petals crimson. Like Lyra, Aurelia reigned as the deity of roses, love, and matrimonial bonds in Rome. Devotees brought roses as offerings to her temples, and the flowers frequently adorned bridal wreaths, perhaps the very seed of the rose's romantic symbolism, at least in the Western imagination. But the rose held other meanings, veiled and complex. For the Romans, it signified confidentiality, a pact of silence. A single rose hung upon a door marked a space for private, consequential discourse. This practice evolved into another custom, adorning the ceilings of banquet halls with roses. Guests, even when sub vino, warmed by wine, remained sub rosa, under the rose. The blossoms served as a constant, silent reminder that words spoken within those walls were bound by secrecy. Intriguingly, this tradition too finds its roots in myth. Eros Minor, a mischievous godling of affection, once gifted a red rose to the god of silence. His motive? To ensure his mother Aurelia's amorous escapades remained unspoken, bribing silence itself with the flower's beauty. In Roman life, roses played vital roles in ceremony. Across the sprawling empire, the festival known as the Rosalia saw garlands of roses and other blooms laid upon burial sites. Here, the rose spoke of a different love, remembrance, hope, and the promise of rebirth. Showers of petals also rained down during triumphal parades honoring returning generals. Though these ancient rites have faded, the rose retains a ceremonial presence in Rome even today. The Pantheon, once a temple to all gods, now stands as a Catholic basilica. Each year at Pentecost, a breathtaking ritual unfolds. Tens of thousands of rose petals drift down through the oculus, the great eye in the dome, blanketing the marble floor below in fragrant drifts. This ethereal cascade symbolizes the descent of the Holy Spirit. Yet, while imbued with spiritual gravity, the rose could also embody opulence, even decadence. Consider the notorious Emperor Valerius of Rome, a lesser-known figure, ascending to power at 14 and reigning but briefly. Legend paints him as more devoted to revelry than governance. At one infamous feast, he orchestrated a deluge of petals from the ceiling, so thick it purportedly smothered some of his unfortunate guests. A dramatic 19th century painting captures the scene. The young emperor lounging, indulging, while his companions vanish beneath a suffocating tide of pink. Another tale from antiquity features the Egyptian queen Neferura, who wielded roses as instruments of seduction and power. Her bedchamber, it's whispered, was filled knee-deep with petals, and she favored pillows stuffed with their fragrant softness. While perhaps embellished by time, these stories illustrate how the rose became a potent symbol not merely of love, but of extravagant luxury, its value amplified by legend as much as by its intrinsic charm. There is more to the rose than captivates the eye or delights the nose. Across centuries and cultures, humanity has drawn upon the flower's practical gifts, its nutritional and medicinal virtues. The rose hip, the fruit nestled beneath the fading petals, bursts with vitamin C. The petals themselves are credited with antibacterial and anti-inflammatory powers. In the lexicon of herbal medicine, they serve to calm digestion, soothe frayed nerves, elevate spirits, and more. The Rosa Gallica, often called the healer's bloom, flourished in medieval Physic gardens, its large, fragrant pink petals prized for both remedies and perfumes. By steeping petals in water, the essence can be captured, transformed into fragrant oils. This art flourished not only in Europe but also across Asia, notably in Persia, modern-day Iran. For hundreds of years, the people of Iran have masterfully extracted essential oil from rose petals. This precious oil perfumes bodies and sanctifies air as incense, while its byproduct, rose water, subtly flavors food and drink and enhances cosmetics. From potent remedies to intoxicating scents, the rose offers manifold practical applications. Yet, for contemporary gardeners, its primary allure remains its ornamental grace. And within Western culture, the rose stands preeminently as a token of romance. Beyond its status as the quintessential Valentine's offering, it blossoms perennially in poetry and song. Intriguingly, the roots of the rose's modern romantic stature can be traced to a specific, extraordinary garden, that of the Château de Chantilly, nestled some 15 kilometers west of Paris. Acquired in 1799, this stately manor became the cherished residence of Madame Eliane de Valois, wife of the formidable General Armand Dubois. In the dawn of the 19th century, while the general pursued campaigns abroad, Eliane poured her energies into refining the house and its grounds. Her childhood on the Caribbean isle of Martinique perhaps instilled in her a passion for collecting flora and fauna from distant shores. "My ambition," she penned in a letter, "is to assemble the most beautiful and curious garden in Europe, a model of cultivation." Eliane cultivated a dazzling array of exotic plants, even constructing a heated orangery for pineapples. Her domain also hosted a menagerie of creatures: kangaroos, zebras, ostriches, permitted to wander the estate. Visitors of the era were likely most astonished by encounters with Eliane's exotic pets. Yet the enduring legacy of Chantilly resides in its unparalleled rose garden. Eliane, sometimes affectionately nicknamed Rose herself, was a collector of fervent dedication. The rose reigned supreme among her affections. Aided by a skilled cadre of gardeners and botanists, she amassed approximately 250 distinct rose varieties within Chantilly's grounds, striving to possess every known type. General Dubois even commanded the French Navy to seize seeds and plants from captured vessels, dispatching them directly to Eliane's burgeoning collection. Her rose garden, immortalized in artworks, became a fount of inspiration for horticulturalists across Europe. It stands as arguably one of the world's seminal and most influential rose gardens, pioneering the concept of a garden devoted predominantly to a single flower genus. Eliane's vast and diverse collection yielded another crucial benefit. It included the ever-blooming roses originating from China. Unlike most European varieties, these Cathay blooms flowered repeatedly, granting them significant added value and commercial promise. Horticulturists began experimenting, interweaving the lineages of different roses. Then, in the 19th century, French breeders achieved a breakthrough: the hybrid tea rose. This cultivar embodies what many consider the classic rose: fragrant, hardy, elegantly formed, and perpetually blooming. Crucially, the hybrid tea rose grows upon a long, sturdy stem, ideal for cutting and presenting as a solitary, eloquent gesture. These long-stemmed icons of romance, synonymous with Valentine's Day, can trace their ancestry indirectly back to Eliane's garden. The Empress played an unwitting yet pivotal role in seeding the modern rose industry. In essence, the rose's romantic symbolism solidified over the past 2 millennia in the West. Its association with love likely bloomed first, with the Greek goddess Lyra and her Roman echo, Aurelia. Centuries hence, drawing inspiration from Madame Eliane de Valois' garden, cultivators perfected the hybrid tea rose, uniting the finest traits of European and Chinese varieties. It swiftly became a coveted romantic gift with widespread commercial allure. Its popularity further cemented by the Victorian penchant for imbuing flowers with specific meanings. But the narrative continues to unfold. Gardeners today persist in nurturing and inventing new rose varieties, experimenting with diverse cultivars just as those inspired by Eliane's collection once did. To conjure a new rose, a breeder selects two parent plants possessing desired traits, perhaps one for its specific blush of coral, the other for its potent, sweet perfume. Pollen is carefully transferred between the chosen parents, mimicking nature's pollinators. This cross-pollination encourages the formation of a rose hip, the berry cradling the seeds of potential. Once ripened, these seeds are harvested, stored, and eventually sown within the controlled climate of a greenhouse. Seedlings showing promise are transplanted outdoors, observed for the garden performance. This meticulous cycle repeats, focusing selection on specimens exhibiting the target characteristics. Professional breeders might undertake as many as 100,000 crosses, a patient endeavor yielding perhaps only a handful of novel hybrids after years of effort. They merge in every conceivable hue, from deepest crimson to ethereal pastels, bearing names as evocative as their petals: Moonstone Serenade, Lavender Nocturne, Velvet Ember, and countless others. And all the while, an ancient rose endures, growing, blooming, year after relentless year. Unlike the breeder's careful creations, this bush is a testament to untamed nature. Known as the Thousand-Year Rose, it clings steadfastly to the wall of Hildesheim Cathedral in Germany. It bears little resemblance to the long-stemmed Valentine's offering or the manicured bushes of Eliane's garden. It is a wild, sprawling entity, scaling the ancient brickwork. This 10-meter giant is a variety of dog rose. For much of the year, it appears as a dense tangle of woody vines, almost tree-like. But annually, in late May, it erupts in a profusion of exquisite, pale pink blossoms, releasing a delicate fragrance. Its name stems from the belief that its origins intertwine with the cathedral's founding in the 9th century. Legend holds that an emperor, finding a snow-covered mound inexplicably crowned by a blooming rose bush in midsummer, decreed a cathedral be built precisely on that spot, encompassing the miraculous plant. The rose bush persisted through the centuries, even surviving the cathedral's bombing during the Second World War. The beauty of most flowers is fleeting, yet the thousand-year rose seems to touch eternity. Each year its blooms arrive and depart, only to return again, an emblem of tenacious hope and cyclical rebirth. And perhaps herein lies the rose's deepest allure. It transcends the vibrancy of its petals, the heavenliness of its scent. It resides in the meanings we weave around it. Though individual blooms must fade, the significance of the rose endures, as timeless as that first ancient flower, the rose that unfurled 35 million years ago.